After 18 years of marriage, you start to think you've got your spouse figured out. Not in the smug way, just in that quiet, practiced way that comes from waking up next to someone every day for nearly 2 decades. You know the look she gives when she's faking a smile. You can tell what kind of day she's had by the way she closes the front door. There's a language that doesn't use words. So when Claire and I pulled up to that rented house by the ocean in Santa Monica, this loud, glass-walled, Instagram-worthy Airbnb full of people I barely knew, I didn't need the sunset or the wine or the salt air to tell me something was off. I could feel it in her silence during the drive, in the way she checked her reflection twice in the visor mirror, in the too careful way she applied her lipstick just before we stepped inside. Like she wasn't getting ready for a party. We were already at the party, but for someone at the party, she was electric the moment we walked in. Not in a warm, social way, but in a way that felt deliberate, energized, almost rehearsed. She practically glided toward the music, toward the laughter, toward the crowd. And I just followed behind like some stiff, silent +1. It was her friend Meredith's birthday. Meredith was a wine and crystals type who had always made me feel like a mechanic in a room full of therapists. Claire hadn't seen her in years, but suddenly she was close enough to demand we make the 2-hour drive from Pasadena to Santa Monica for this thing. I had work early the next morning. Claire said we needed this. This turned out to be a rented beach house full of 40-somethings trying to relive their late 20s. The kind of party with artisanal cocktails, a Bluetooth speaker hooked up to someone's S*XY Vibes playlist, and a lot of forced laughter echoing off marble countertops. I stood in the kitchen nursing a beer I didn't really want, while Claire disappeared into the crowd like it was her natural habitat. That's when I saw him. He wasn't part of the core group, not someone I recognized from any of Claire's friend circles. Tall, salt and pepper hair, square jaw, wearing a too tight black shirt and a Rolex that might have been real. He moved through the room like he'd already been told he was the most interesting person there. And Claire? Claire noticed him immediately. I watched her laugh at something he said. The hand she placed on his shoulder lingered too long. They leaned in too close. I told myself it was nothing. People flirt, especially after a couple drinks. But it wasn't just that. It was how she looked at him. Like she wanted to be seen by him. Like she wanted me to see it too. I was still holding my warm beer when they vanished. 1 minute she was next to him, talking animatedly with a group near the back doors, and the next, gone. I scanned the deck, checked the hallway. Nothing. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. I tried not to panic. I told myself she probably went to the bathroom, or got caught up with someone she hadn't seen in years. I checked my phone, scrolled pointlessly, stared at the blue glow of the screen to avoid thinking too hard. When she finally came back, she looked different. Not drastically, not enough for anyone else to notice. But I did. Her hair was slightly tousled, like she'd been out in the wind. Her lip gloss was gone. Her cheeks were flushed, and not in a from-the-wine way. In her hand was a drink I hadn't poured. And she was smiling, too big, too carefree. I tried to keep it light. "Where'd you run off to?" She shrugged like it was no big deal. "Oh, just chatting. That guy Evan? He's in real estate. Super interesting." "Evan?" I repeated as neutrally as I could. "You were talking with him?" She smiled and sipped her drink. "Yeah, just catching up. You looked busy." I wasn't. I hadn't talked to anyone for longer than a minute all night. But she didn't wait for a response. She wandered off again, this time toward the back patio, humming along to whatever remix was playing, like nothing had just happened. For the next hour, I played the part, the dutiful husband. I smiled when someone asked how long we'd been married. I nodded when someone mentioned the waves were louder than the music. But my mind kept circling back to that 10-minute gap, to Evan, to Claire's missing lip gloss and her drink I didn't recognize. It was later, maybe around 10:30, when everything snapped into sharp relief. A group had gathered near the living room couch. Meredith was holding court, asking one of those open-ended questions people ask when they're buzzed and philosophical. "Do you think monogamy still works? Like, really works?" Claire jumped in before anyone else could. "I actually think people take it way too seriously," she said. laughing as she curled her feet beneath her on the couch. Maybe it's time we all stopped pretending that one person can meet every single need forever. I mean, wouldn't it be interesting to just trade partners sometimes? Like an experiment? A few people laughed awkwardly. Someone made a joke about hall passes. I didn't laugh. Claire's eyes flicked to mine, daring me to say something. When I didn't, she turned back to the group. Come on, it's just a game. Michael's just old-fashioned. He doesn't like to share. The words hit harder than I expected. She smiled, that rehearsed little smirk that used to be cute when she was 28 and teasing me at dinner. But now, felt sharp, purposeful. And then, for just a second, her eyes softened, like she was testing me, like she wanted to see if I'd react. I didn't give her the satisfaction, but inside something twisted, something snapped, because I realized in that moment, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being paranoid. I wasn't reading into things. Claire wasn't just trying to have fun. She wasn't just drunk. She wasn't joking. She was making a statement. And more than that, she was shifting the blame. It wasn't her fault if I felt uncomfortable. I was insecure, jealous, stuck in the past. If I wasn't okay with the idea of her cozying up to strangers and disappearing for chunks of time, then I was the one with the problem, not her. She'd constructed a perfect little shield, all wrapped up in modern language and faux liberation. And I'd seen this move before, just never so public, so rehearsed. I stayed quiet the rest of the night. I watched her mingle, watched her laugh, watched her dance just a little too closely to the music. I didn't say another word, because I knew it wouldn't matter. She'd already rewritten the script, and I was no longer the co-author. The next morning, we drove home in silence. Claire had a latte in one hand, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. She scrolled her phone, pretending not to notice that I hadn't said a single word since we left Santa Monica. I kept my eyes on the road, one hand on the wheel, the other clenching and unclenching in my lap. My knuckles were sore by the time we got to the 405. She played a playlist on low volume, breezy indie stuff like nothing had happened. Like we were just another couple nursing hangovers from a night of harmless fun. But I wasn't hungover. I hadn't even drunk enough to get a buzz. I'd been too focused, too aware. And now, every second since we left that house was filled with the relentless churn of memory. One piece of the puzzle at a time. A few months ago, Claire started coming home later than usual. She said work had gotten more demanding, new clients, bigger projects, last-minute meetings. I believed her at first. Claire's job in marketing wasn't exactly 9 to 5, and she'd always been career-driven. But then the explanations got slippery. Sometimes she'd walk in the door with takeout in hand, acting like she was doing me a favor, apologizing with a tired kiss on the cheek. Other nights, she'd come in without dinner, saying she already ate, that she wasn't hungry, that she had sushi with the team, that the meeting ran late, that traffic was brutal, that her phone had died. The excuses piled up like leaves in the gutter. Harmless, maybe, if they weren't so consistent, so rehearsed. One night, I asked what campaign was keeping her so busy lately. She blinked at me, just for a second, and then she rattled off something vague, a hospitality client, but never mentioned the brand or the project again. I remember thinking how unlike her that was. Claire lives for details. If she had a breakthrough on a campaign, I usually heard about it over dinner for days. But suddenly, her work became this off-limits fog. I told myself I was being dramatic. I didn't want to be that guy, the overthinking husband with insecurity issues. But then came the change in her clothes. She'd always dressed well. Elegant, sharp, a little artsy. But something shifted. Tighter jeans. Tops that showed more shoulder. Brand new heels she wore to client meetings. I asked her once if she was shopping for a new look. She smiled, tossed her hair and said, "Just trying something different. You don't like it?" Of course I said I liked it. I was her husband. I didn't want to be critical, but it felt less like a style change and more like a presentation, like she was dressing for an audience and I wasn't part of it. Then came the solo trips. First it was a wellness retreat upstate. A girls' weekend, she said. Just yoga, wine, and hot springs. She needed to decompress. She was stressed. I understood, at least I tried to. I offered to come with her. She laughed. Michael, it's girls only. You'd be bored out of your mind. That weekend, she barely answered texts. Said they were doing phone detoxing, which sounded innocent, trendy even, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being shut out, kept on the outside of something I used to be part of. Then it happened again, and again. 2 weekends in Palm Springs, one in Ojai, a conference in San Diego that didn't have a name I could Google. Every time she gave just enough detail to sound plausible, but not enough to ask follow-up questions. I remember standing in our kitchen one morning while she packed her bag. I asked if she'd be reachable. She said no, spotty reception, bad Wi-Fi, you know how these retreats are. And then, just as she zipped her bag shut, she turned and smiled at me like I was the one being unreasonable. You're not gonna get all needy on me while I'm gone, are you? It was a joke, maybe, but it hit wrong. It hit like, don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. And then there was her phone. Claire used to leave her phone everywhere. On the table, on the couch, charging on the kitchen counter while she went to take a bath. Now, it was practically glued to her hand. Always face down. Notifications silenced. Locked tighter than a vault. One time, I picked it up to move it off a stack of mail, and the screen lit up. Nothing revealing, just a string of initials from someone named E. But when Claire saw it in my hand, she moved across the room like I'd touched a landmine. Can you not? She snapped. That's my work phone. Funny, it had never been just a work phone before. She started deleting photos too. Not all at once, just enough to notice. I pulled up our anniversary album one evening because I wanted to show someone the restaurant we'd gone to last year. And it was gone. The entire folder. I figured it was a fluke. Then I checked our honeymoon pictures. Half were missing. Photos of us. Photos of me. I asked her, jokingly, if she was making space for more selfies. She didn't laugh. You're so paranoid, she muttered, walking out of the room. Paranoid. That word stuck with me. She used it more often after that. When I asked why her location sharing was suddenly turned off. When I asked why she seemed distant at dinner. When I mentioned that I hadn't met any of the new friends she kept talking about. You overthink everything, she'd say. You always assume the worst. And maybe I did. But now, driving home with her scrolling her phone beside me, her wedding ring glinting in the sunlight like it still meant something, I realized it wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. Coldness at home. Short fuses over nothing. Rolling her eyes when I asked where she'd been. Dodging affection like it was a chore. It was like I'd been slowly pushed out of my own life, inch by inch. And I let it happen because I didn't want to admit what my gut was screaming. Because I was scared that if I said it out loud, if I named it, it would be real. And I wasn't ready. Not yet. She glanced at me once on the drive home. Just for a second. I pretended not to see. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But in that moment, I think we both knew. Something had broken. Not last night. Not even recently. It had been breaking for a while. I just hadn't let myself see it until it was too late. Now I couldn't unsee it. And I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to look at her the same way again. I didn't go looking for proof right away. That's the part people don't understand when they hear stories like this. They assume the moment suspicion hits, you start snooping, digging, hacking passwords like some amateur detective. But the truth is, part of me was still hoping I was wrong. That all those red flags had some boring explanation. Stress. Midlife restlessness. A phase. So I waited. For a few days I watched. I listened. I paid attention to the details I used to ignore. Claire was polite. Almost gentle. Like someone walking around a sleeping animal. She asked if I wanted coffee in the mornings. Told me about errands she'd run. Kissed my cheek before leaving the house. But there was no warmth in it. No presence. It was performance. The moment that changed everything came quietly. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Claire had gone out for what she called a long client lunch. I was home because my meetings had been canceled, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt too quiet. I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop, not really working, just thinking. That's when her iPad chimed. It was charging on the kitchen counter, something she must have forgotten in her rush to leave. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it, but the sound kept repeating, soft, insistent. I walked over, meaning only to silence it. A notification banner flashed across the screen. iCloud backup complete. That was it. No message preview. No incriminating text. Just a routine system notification. But something about it stuck. Maybe it was timing. Maybe it was the word backup. Or maybe I was already standing at the edge and just needed the smallest push. I unlocked the iPad. Claire and I had shared passwords for years. We used to joke that there was nothing to hide. I hadn't tried her code in months. It still worked. I didn't open messages. Not at first. I opened photos. At a glance, everything looked normal. Family pictures. Food sh*ts. Random screensh *ts. But then I noticed a folder I didn't recognize. One that wasn't labeled. Tucked near the bottom. It wasn't locked. It wasn't hidden behind some dramatic warning. It was just there. I opened it. The first photo was a hotel balcony at night. City lights in the distance. A glass of wine on a small table. I almost closed it, thinking maybe it was from a work trip. Then I swiped. Another hotel room. Different city. Same angle. Same lighting. Then another. And another. And then Claire appeared. Not selfies. Not posed sh*ts. Candid photos. Her lying on white sheets. Hair loose. Skin bare at the shoulders. Not looking at the camera. Looking at someone. Smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I felt my hands go cold. I sat down at the kitchen table because my legs stopped trusting me. I kept scrolling slower now. More carefully. There were videos too, short ones. Nothing graphic. Just her laughing. Leaning out of frame. Someone else breathing nearby. A man's voice. Not mine. I didn't need to see more. But I did. Buried deeper in the folder were screensh *ts. Boarding passes. Hotel reservations. Calendar entries. And finally, messages. His name was Evan. The same Evan from the party. The messages weren't explicit. They didn't need to be. They were familiar. Int *mate. Efficient. Two people coordinating a life that wasn't supposed to exist. Same place as last time. I'll be there early. I miss you already. I scrolled until my chest hurt. One message stopped me completely. It was dated the week before the party. Saturday's perfect. The beach house will be chaotic. He won't suspect anything. And if he does, I'll handle it. I stared at that line for a long time. I'll handle it. The party. The disappearing act. The partner-swapping joke. The way she'd smiled while calling me jealous and old-fashioned. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't alcohol. It wasn't curiosity. It was strategy. I didn't confront her when she came home. She walked in later that evening, talking about traffic, about a colleague who wouldn't stop complaining. I nodded, asked how her day was, listened like nothing had happened. She didn't notice anything different. Or maybe she did and she just assumed, like always, that I'd swallow it. That night, she fell asleep quickly. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in order. Not the affair itself that almost felt secondary now, but the planning, the manipulation, the way she'd been rewriting reality in real time, daring me to doubt myself. By morning, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was clear. And once you have clarity, you don't rush. You don't shout. You don't beg for explanations that won't mean anything. You decide what kind of man you're going to be next. And I knew exactly what I wasn't going to be. The next morning, I didn't say anything. Claire got up before me, like she always did on Thursdays, and padded into the kitchen. I heard her moving around, the clinking of cups, the soft hum of the electric kettle. She was still playing the part, quiet, pleasant, domestic. Maybe she thought we were settling back into a routine, that my silence the night before had meant surrender. Maybe she thought the trick had worked. But it hadn't. It wasn't rage I felt. Not despair. Not even heartbreak anymore. It was distance. Cold and still, like a tide going out in the middle of the night. I sat up in bed and stared at the wall for a while. Then I got up, brushed my teeth, and walked past her in the hallway. She smiled and said, "Morning." I said it back. Nothing in my tone. Nothing in my face. Just static. That's how it started. Not with a fight. Not with accusations. With withdrawal. I didn't confront her. I didn't tell her what I'd seen. I didn't ask her who Evan was or how long it had been going on. I didn't give her the chance to lie again, because it would have been a lie. That much I knew. Instead, I changed the rules of the game. I stopped checking her phone location, even though I still had access. I stopped asking where she was going, or when she'd be back. I stopped asking if she wanted dinner. I stopped offering small talk. I let her exist in the space she'd carved out, the space where I was no longer supposed to notice. At first, Claire didn't seem to mind. In fact, she almost seemed relieved, like she thought I'd finally mellowed out, like her little experiment in distraction had worked. But over the next few days, I saw something else in her eyes. Uncertainty. Started small. I canceled our upcoming weekend plans, brunch with friends, a wine tasting we'd signed up for a month ago. I told her I had things to do. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Then I changed the passwords to our shared Netflix and Amazon accounts. No explanation. She mentioned it once while scrolling through her iPad. "Hey, is the account logged out?" I looked up from my book. "Yeah, I switched some stuff around. I'll send you the new login." I never did. The next week, I canceled our joint gym membership. Switched back to my old one across town, the place I went before we got married. When she asked why, I told her I needed space. She paused. "Space for what?" I shrugged. "My routine." I started going on long walks in the evenings. Not just around the block. Long, deliberate walks that lasted hours. I didn't tell her where I went. I didn't answer her texts right away. When I got back, I'd shower, read, and go to bed without so much as a good night. By the end of the second week, she stopped pretending not to notice. I caught her watching me in the kitchen, her expression tight, like someone trying to do math in their head and coming up with the wrong answer. I asked if something was wrong. She shook her head. But the next night, she waited for me on the couch. "Michael," she said carefully, "can we talk?" I sat across from her. She was barefoot, curled up like she was trying to appear small. Vulnerable. Pose I'd seen before. It used to work. "What's up?" I asked. She hesitated. "I feel like you've been distant." "Have I?" Her eyes flicked to mine, like she was trying to read a code I hadn't shared. "I don't know," she said. "You've just been different lately, less present." "I've been here," I said. "Same as always." She studied me for a moment longer. "Is everything okay?" I nodded. "Everything's fine." That was the first real crack. She didn't know what to do with that. She wasn't used to being the one guessing. She'd spent the last year feeding me just enough information to keep me confused. But now that the roles had reversed, she was uncomfortable. Good, because for the first time in a long time I had control. I stopped offering her the version of me she expected. The husband who asked about her day, who remembered her meetings, who texted little check-ins during lunch. That man was gone. In his place was someone she couldn't predict. And that made her nervous. I watched it unfold like an experiment. The way she checked her phone more when I walked into the room. The way she started wearing makeup in the house again. The way she asked if I was okay twice, 3 times a day, when just a month ago she would have snapped if I asked her the same. I didn't give her anything. One afternoon, I walked into the garage and canceled our shared credit card. Not out of spite, just as a boundary. I opened a new one in my name only. She found out when hers was declined at a boutique downtown. She came home and asked, confused. I didn't flinch. "We weren't using it responsibly," I said flatly. "I needed more oversight." She stared at me for a long moment. "Are you mad at me?" "No," I said. "Why would I be?" But I watched her shoulders tense. It wasn't just the money. It was the shift. The quiet, deliberate erosion of all the things she'd once used to measure her influence. I wasn't lashing out. I wasn't blowing up. I wasn't chasing her. I was simply stepping away. and that scared her more than anything else could have. By the third week, I started going out more. Not wildly, not recklessly, just enough to be noticed. I met up with old friends I hadn't seen in years. I joined a weekend hiking group. I even went to a dinner hosted by one of our old college acquaintances, alone. When Claire found out, she asked if she was supposed to be invited. I said, "I figured you'd be busy." She didn't respond, just nodded slowly, like she was processing a different kind of betrayal, one she hadn't anticipated. I started sleeping better, eating better. My face in the mirror looked clearer, not happier, just honest, like I wasn't performing anymore. Claire noticed that too. She began trying harder, making breakfast, wearing that perfume I used to love, asking if I wanted to watch movies together, reaching for my hand while we walked to the car. I didn't pull away, but I didn't respond either. I let her hold the silence, because I wanted her to sit in it, to sit in the exact confusion she'd left me in for months. This was the shift. Not revenge, not cruelty, just consequence. And for once, she was the one uncertain of what came next. The strange thing about pulling away from someone who's been lying to you is that they don't panic right away. At first, they enjoy the space. They think it's peace. They think you've calmed down, stopped probing, stopped being suspicious. They don't realize that distance can be strategic. But eventually, something shifts. They stop feeling safe in your silence. That's when the unease creeps in. That's when they start to unravel. By week 4, Claire had gone from vaguely curious about my mood to clearly disturbed by it. Her questions got more frequent, more pointed. "Is everything okay between us? You've been really quiet lately. Are you stressed about something? Did I do something wrong?" And the best one, "Are you seeing someone?" That one almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly ironic. She said it casually over breakfast, like it was a joke, but I saw the flicker of fear behind her eyes. She was used to being the one keeping secrets. Now, faced with even a sliver of the unknown, she was spiraling. I didn't answer. I just smiled and sipped my coffee. That smile ruined her whole day. She paced more, stayed on her phone longer, sent me random texts while I was out, some affectionate, some weirdly formal. "Hope your meeting's going well. Just checking in. Dinner tonight? Miss you." She'd never sent me miss you texts before. Not in years. But now, every interaction was overcorrected. It was like watching someone try to plug a sinking ship with band-aids. And I hadn't even said anything yet. That was the beauty of it. The truth had already changed the balance. She just didn't know how much I knew. And not knowing? That was worse than any accusation. I waited until the following weekend to set things in motion. I texted Claire's parents and invited them over for dinner. We hadn't seen them in months, ever since Claire canceled Thanksgiving plans with a weak excuse about work travel. They were polite about it, but I knew they had questions. They loved their daughter, but they had always been quietly skeptical of how much she needed space in the marriage. I also invited 2 of our mutual couple friends, people who'd known us a long time, people who'd seen our early years, vacations, game nights, birthdays, friends who had slowly stopped inviting us to things, probably because we were walking tension half the time. I made it sound casual. Just a nice dinner. No reason to suspect anything. Claire raised an eyebrow when I told her who was coming, but she didn't push. I think she assumed I was trying to patch things up, that I wanted to look normal again. She put on her favorite dress that night, cooked too much, smiled too hard. I helped. I set the table, opened wine, made jokes. I was perfect. Dinner started with laughter. People settled into comfort like they always do with familiar faces. Wine glasses clinked. Claire's dad told a story we'd heard before. Someone asked about a trip we took to Portland years ago, and Claire started to answer, then paused when I didn't jump in. The energy dipped, just for a second. That's when I did it. Not an announcement, not an accusation, just a toast. I stood, glass in hand, and said, "I want to raise a glass to everyone here, to time, to history, to long relationships, ones that grow, shift, and sometimes get tested. I've been thinking a lot about what it takes to make something last. Not just love, but respect, boundaries, truth. Claire froze. I didn't look at her yet. I just let the words hang. It's funny how, after all these years, the hardest part isn't staying together. It's staying honest, staying real. We forget how much silence we tolerate to avoid asking hard questions. And sometimes, we protect the idea of a relationship instead of the actual relationship. The room was quiet now. Claire's mother set her fork down. Claire laughed, too sharply. "Wow," she said. "Did you rehearse that?" I looked at her then. "No. It just came to me." She smiled tightly. "I guess I'm old-fashioned. I thought dinner was for light conversation." I smiled back. "I used to think that too." Our friends exchanged glances. Claire's father cleared his throat. The conversation drifted awkwardly toward neutral ground. Someone asked about work. Someone else mentioned a new series on HBO. But the mood never recovered. It had shifted. I had shifted it. Claire didn't eat much after that. She smiled when spoken to, but her eyes kept darting toward me, like she was trying to measure something she couldn't see. That night, after everyone left, she cornered me in the hallway. "What the hell was that?" she hissed. "What was what?" "That little speech. Don't play dumb." "I wasn't being dramatic," I said calmly. "Just reflective." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. "Are you trying to make me look bad in front of people?" "No," I said. "I don't need to do that." She paused. "Why are you acting like this?" "Just, if you have something to say, Michael, say it." But that was the thing. I didn't need to say it. She knew. Or at least she feared I did. And that fear, that was enough. I walked past her into the kitchen, left the dishes, went to bed early, didn't touch her. The following week, Claire started falling apart in small, fascinating ways. She left work early for the first time in months. She offered to cook dinner every night. She asked me, without irony, if I wanted to go away for a weekend, just the two of us. I said I'd think about it. I could see the pressure mounting in her. She was waiting for something to happen, for me to explode, to confront her, to accuse her. She wanted a scene, something tangible she could react to, argue against, spin a narrative around. But I wouldn't give it to her. Instead, I made a show of sorting through paperwork, filing things, making calls. I left a brochure for a financial advisor on the counter one day, just long enough for her to see it before I moved it. She asked me why I was being so clinical. I said I was just trying to organize things better. She didn't buy it, but she also didn't challenge it, because she didn't know what I knew, and that was the real power. Her affair with Evan, that had been a betrayal of int asterisk Macy. But this was a betrayal of control. And Claire didn't know how to handle being on the receiving end. I watched her unravel from a quiet place, never raising my voice, never making accusations, just giving her the one thing she never gave me, silence. Because silence in the right hands isn't weakness. It's a we asterisk p asterisk n. And I wasn't done using it yet. One morning I quietly packed my things, only the essentials. I left the house keys, the joint accounts, even the home title transfer paperwork. No arguments, no notes, just a clean, silent exit. I'd already signed everything over. Claire came home to a hollowed-out bedroom and legal documents waiting on the table. I didn't ask for anything. No alimony, no confrontation. I didn't even leave a goodbye. She expected chaos. Tears, rage, a dramatic fight. What she got was absence. Final, unshakable absence. That, more than anything, shattered her illusion of control. I didn't burn the bridge. I simply walked off it and never looked back. I moved to a new city, started over, found a quiet apartment near the water and started working freelance. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I reconnected with old friends. One of them, Lauren, reminded me what it felt like to laugh without checking my tone. No rush, no labels, just life moving again. Months later, I ran into Claire. She acted surprised, then overly warm, like we were old friends. She talked like nothing had happened. still managing the narrative, still spinning her version of events. I just smiled and nodded, because none of it mattered anymore. I wasn't part of her story now, and that was freedom.